Right, we want to buckle down to a discussion here with our panelists, and of course we know the events of the past week should jolt really Kenyans into reflecting on our system of governance and state of the economy. Increasingly and steadily, the executive has managed to emasculate the other arms of government, and inadvertently, we are relapsing to the era of powerful presidency without checks and balances. During the controversial vote on Thursday, on the memo by President Uhuru Kenyatta, who had rejected the finance bill passed earlier by Parliament, the executive found its way through manipulation and coercion. MPs behaved badly when they realized they could not block passage of President Kenyatta's proposals. But underneath, that was a sense of frustration. The executive, I should say, is getting its way through the House. Parliament, ideally, the custodian of the public's interest, has been weakened and rendered willingly or unwillingly an appendage of the executive. Since March, when President Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga entered a political truce and undertook to cooperate and work together on matters of national interest, the spirit of opposition politics equally died. In principle, the handshake was meant to cool down political temperatures and allow for reasoned debate on public matters. But that did not mean killing the opposition and reverting to the era of single party. It was not meant to cripple opposition. But what has happened is that the opposition has been severely incapacitated. Opposition leaders inside and outside Parliament have abandoned their role and instead become proteges of the executive. So what do you reckon, right? In light of this, we want to continue with the conversation. We want to also hear from you as well. You could head over to our Twitter handle. Our Twitter handle is AMLiveNTV. AMLiveNTV is our profile name on Facebook, and 20686 is our SMS portal. Let's get to discussing this, and with our panelists as well, whom I want to introduce this morning as well. We have with us Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who is a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We do have with us as well Senator Okong'o Omogeni, who is the senator of Nyamira. Also, we do have with us Jeremiah Kioni, who is a member of parliament from Ndaragwa, also the chair of CIOC. We do have with us as well Governor Muthomi Njuki from Tharaka Nithi, and Samuel Poghisio also, who is a senator from West Pokot. Right, gentlemen, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. You can ask me for some tea first, so that actually you can get energized this morning as well. But let's just drill deeper now to this particular event that really happened last week. And I would love to hear for them that were actually in the House. Jeremiah Kioni, I really tried looking at the whole proceedings that was happening in the afternoon. I didn't see your face anywhere. Where were you?
Whom did you see in that chaos? It was certainly difficult.
I didn't see you chanting.
It was certainly difficult to make up any face. And especially if you cannot push and pull just for space, scream and heckle.
Yes.
There was no room for you. But we were there. Mm-hmm. We were part of the process. I must say that I got to Parliament a little bit after the fracas had already started. So I didn't have an opportunity to go into the House at the very early or at the onset. Mm-hmm. So I found the bar having been drawn, but I was part of the process. I was kept outside until there was room to go in and try to do what was necessary when inside.
You were kept outside?
Yes, by the fact that the bar had been drawn, not by anybody.
So you were running late into the place?
Yeah, I got in a little bit after the process of voting had already been started. It moves a little bit fast. People didn't allow space for debates. So if you are late for just like 10 minutes, that's already too late. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we expected. We expected to be in a house where we would have debated what we needed to debate. But there was no room for debate. It's like people had made up their minds. There are those who had decided we are just going to vote it this way or the other way, heckle people this way or the other way. But I think it's part of the process, unfortunately.
All right. So the question will be from this point, because we saw a whole block of MPs saying they were voting a no. Then they actually swung on the other side of the pendulum. Afterwards, everyone was actually now in favor of that particular memorandum.
I don't
So
know.
we fail to understand, well, the same people were talking about the voting it no. Then when we had this particular 15-minute break, coming back to the House, everyone now has actually, gone the other way, voting for that particular bill. So were parliamentarians speaking from both sides of the mouth?
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, Debarl and colleagues. There was a lot of that, not a little bit of that. There was a lot of that, both sides of the mouth, until it emerged that we will need to vote electronically, and it will be known where you voted. There were many people who wanted to be in the heckling crowd, but never to be known exactly where they voted. But when it became apparent that some of us wanted it known which way one was, you could see the quick shifting of positions. But I don't think that may be the very important thing. The issue is that what does it entail for Kenyans, and why had it to be done? And I think that will be more useful for us in this debate.
Governor Muthomi, I think, of course, also the counties is really affected, and we've had a statement from the Council of Governors as well, protesting what is really happening. Of course, the slashing of the budget, running to almost 10 billion shillings. How will this also affect you?
Thank you, Debarl. Good morning. And
Good morning.
First and foremost, I want to call the Member of Parliament for being very frank. I saw him in one of the dailies watching the proceedings on TV from one of the rooms, but he's very frank. It is important to note that what happened in Parliament was a repeat of what happened in the 11th Parliament when we had the controversial security laws. But the paradox of this whole thing this time is that during the security laws, the executive had the numbers, but there was hooliganism to ensure that voting does not take place. This time it was the other way around. The executive did not have the numbers, and therefore the agents of the executive turned hooligans in the House to ensure that voting does not take place. It was very interesting to note that the management of Parliament went to an extent of sabotaging the systems to ensure that voting does not take place. Debarl, there's no way that an electronic system in Parliament that is so reliable can suddenly report presence of 352 vis-a-vis the normal 349. It means that somebody must have intentionally tampered with the system for it to report that.
Yes.
And you can bet that it cannot be the members of Parliament who tampered with the system. That is in the hands of the management of Parliament, of course, and the agents of the same. So it was a question of it had to happen. There are many ways of killing a cat, and this time they decided to strangle it by sitting on it. It had to be done. That the voting had to go the way that the executive needed it to go. However, as the Member of Parliament put it, that's not really very important, but it's good for people to see that even when you talk about independent arms of government, this independence is yes, there in the law, but in practice it may be a bit evasive in practicing, even when we do not have systems that have discipline, and especially the discipline in the action. I don't think there's any reason really to try the hooliganism way. Yet the members of Parliament know very well it has never worked in the past.
Yes.
I think the best thing would have been just to keep quiet and wait silently, because the voting is by secret. Or even if it's by electronic, it would be seen when it has happened, rather than just making intentions known on the floor of the House by shouting and other people getting prepared. To the extent of members are being pulled out to ensure that we have no quorum to sabotage the whole system. It means that Kenyans out there at the moment as much as they feel represented in the House, and I don't know they are represented. There are forces that are bigger than their representation that will determine which way and how they will live, not really their members of parliament, both Senate and the National Assembly.
Right.
The implication into the counties is very devastating, actually. And you just watch the next few days. There will be a series of events that will make the services delivery very, very difficult in this country. Because we are talking about acts that govern this that were broken. The Division of Revenue Act 2018 that was already passed, indicating that counties will be given 314 million. And it is on the basis of this that the counties did their budget, which have already been passed. They have been gazetted as law. It is implementation. But they're implementing money they did not have, because based on 314, now they have to go down to less than, 305 billion. It means every county has an average of 192 million loss. You can imagine 192 million in your budget. How many items of that budget that you'll not be able to implement? How do you explain to the wananchi that I'm not able to implement this that you passed and promised? And remember, one of the very critical activities in budget making process in the counties is public participation, which is also very expensive.
Thank you.
You've gone through public, and they have agreed this is what you'll do, and you've agreed, and then now it's not there.
All right. Right. Also, let's get your introductory remarks also, Dr. Shem Ochuodho.
Debarl, it was very unfortunate what we witnessed or watched happen in Parliament last week. I think the bottom line is it's high time that particularly the executive and to an extent the legislature realize that we must inculcate the culture of dialogue and conversation, because the problem we're facing is a national problem. You cannot solve it by grandstanding or by forcing people to vote in a particular way. We have a problem we must find a solution to. For me, coming from the communication sector, the new taxes on mobile money, on phone calls and so on, mobile money transfers through bank systems or mobile banking systems, that's going to retard a growth, innovation that we've been witnessing in the country. One thing that Kenya has first become known for is M-Pesa. One of the very few legs we're still standing on. If we are going to reverse that, then where are we heading as a country? I agree with the governor here. They devolved resources. If government was to touch anything, the last and least they should have touched is devolution, because as dialogue contact group, for example, we want to see deepening of devolution, actually the funds being sent out more to the counties than reducing. So I really, it was a sad black day, but yes, I also must compliment Honorable Jeremiah Kioni. When we were here last Monday, he was very forthright what his stand was going to be, and he didn't in a way disappoint. We had a member of parliament here who took a different position from what we witnessed happen in parliament when the voting came about. But more importantly, Debarl, we must have public participation and national conversation on this issue. So I don't think it's going to go away soon.
Thank you. Let's hear from Okong'o Omogeni. Good morning.
Morning,
yes.
Debarl. Yeah. First, Debarl, I must say that what I saw in Parliament on Thursday is that for the first time, MPs were the heartbeat of common mwananchi, majority of them. And I think if you speak to the ordinary mwananchi, there's a feeling that the winners were the nays and not the yes. That's the feeling out there. But, the bigger question, I think, is what we will call an appetite by the executive to really cut down on the influence and the independence of Parliament. Because Debarl, you could see that the way the proceedings were conducted on Thursday, there was an agitation by the executive to ensure that that vote passes by hook or crook. And I think what I've seen from the Jubilee government is taking us back. You know, we are slowly reversing the clock to the times when MPs used to get orders from State House and then they are directed out to vote. And you will see that, you know, before the vote was taken, the president had summoned members of the Jubilee coalition. But what was impressive is that a good number of them stood up and said they will not go by the directives the president had given. And I think that's something that we should applaud. But you can again see that there are some MPs who have not appreciated that Parliament is independent, that you shouldn't, you know, fear too much what the position of an executive is in a particular issue, because the role of MPs in Parliament, as I've always said, is to deliberate on issues of concern to the people and pass decisions. But I saw a number of MPs who were so scared of, I think, the position that the executive had taken, that they moved out of Parliament, stood outside. I don't know whether you saw that photo. And they were just watching proceedings on TV. I mean, what a tragedy, really. You have been elected by the people to sit in Parliament and take a position. I mean, and nobody will, you know, kill you for taking a position. So it was really unfortunate to see members of Parliament moving out of the floor of the House, standing outside, watching proceedings, maybe because they didn't want the executive to know that they are taking a certain position. And the bigger picture, Debarl, is that really our political parties and the executive should appreciate that members of Parliament have a constitutional obligation to fight for common mwananchi. So what we are reading in the papers of parties, maybe Jubilee and ODM, wanting to take disciplinary action against those who defied the government's position, it's something that is not welcome. And then finally, I think I've seen reports that a number of Kenyans, including members of Parliament, who are not pleased the way the proceedings were conducted, intend to proceed to court to challenge the way the finance bill was passed by Parliament. I think the law that we have developed, the jurisprudence around this issue, is that courts have always said that yes, Parliament has the constitutional mandate to pass legislations, but the threshold is that will those bills, if they are put to test, will they have validity in terms of the constitutional lawmaking process that has been given to Parliament?
Thank you.
If this process is found to be flawed in whatever way, then I can see a risk on the laws that were passed on Thursday.
Right. Before we take a short break, just let's get also your introductory remarks from.
Thank you very much, Debarl. Maybe two questions that I will ask. Maybe one was that was the parliamentary group meeting acrimonious, because we didn't get details whether it was acrimonious, because if one thing was agreed on at the PG, it didn't show on the floor. Number two, the question number two is, was there always a plan to add all these other cuts to the revenue collection? In other words, was there always a plan B? Was it always on the table so that it was easy to identify which areas to cut in case of the bill failing or changes? Those questions will help us to understand. But there is a principle in legislation that says there's no taxation without representation. And so you would wonder, Debarl, if those guys who are locked up in the loo were representing their people, those people who ran away, because you cannot be taxed and your representative is not there, and so you needed to be there to face the situation.
There's a lot.
Let him finish. Yes.
So that we can ask those people who stayed home, who didn't come to vote. People have been taxed without you representing them, and that's why you're elected.
Right, but the probably question that maybe we need to ask ourselves as we take a short break is, how can a whole grown man, or for that matter a woman, be actually caught by the nape of a neck and the seat of their pants and be locked up in a toilet? So do you believe that some legislators were actually dragged into the toilet by the leader of majority, that is Aden Duale, as they claim, and locked up there? Yeah, a full-grown MP that we've been, or has been elected, or she's been elected by, the citizenry, that she doesn't have, or he doesn't have a mobile phone to call for help while in the toilet. So these are some of the things that we just want to interrogate this morning. Well, the whole scenario that we saw in Parliament, was it actually stage managed right from the beginning? We've had here also Governor Muthomi Njuki raising questions about, the screens that had 352 as the figures of the legislators were in the House by then. We know constitutionally they are supposed to be 349. But we want to look right from the start, because I think following that, we had all these misgivings that the whole scenario has been stage planned, stage managed, that even the 352 itself, as you've mentioned, even that was particularly intent to create the whole scenario where we'll have a break, and then when we have a break is when now we're going to split numbers. And even the speaker himself was really, part and parcel of this stage management of the whole scenario that we saw in Parliament on Thursday. So let's just try and interrogate. So when we saw all this drama and people shouting and chanting, all this was for the public gallery, because we saw when the chair of a committee, she asked for a Mlolongo to be done. No one really wanted a Mlolongo. If they had the interest of Kenyans in their hearts, why didn't you go for Mlolongo in the first place? With the full glare of cameras and the media also beaming all that particular event all over the country. Jeremiah Kioni.
The most difficult thing is to, because I can tell that I'm likely to be around in a short while, even within this panel. But I get encouragement from the book of Exodus, which says that you don't need to be... you
can take solace in the Bible right now.
You don't need to follow the crowd when they are wrong. And I want to say this. Or even perhaps perfect justice, just because there is a crowd on the other side. But let me say this. One is that it was clear to many of us, and those who are outside, like my colleagues who are not in Parliament, might have found the difficulty of understanding what the numbers were like. And I can tell you, without any doubt in my mind, the numbers on the government side were higher. When the Parliament started, there is a team that walked out, and that was on their device, perhaps on the leadership of Duale, and he has owned up to it. There are those he advised to walk out, but there are still those who remained inside, who wanted to vote with the government. So even the numbers that were within Parliament did not represent the side that wanted to defeat the government memorandum. And if I had been in Parliament a little bit earlier, I would not have left. I would still have been there to vote no to trying and shooting down the president memorandum. So I can tell you again and again, the numbers on the government side were higher. And when the people, which is no and which is yes, the people who had thought of wanting to defeat the government, the president memorandum, when they realized that they don't have the numbers, they resorted to heckling. There was need for debate so that people could understand why is it that people are on this side and the other side. And one of the things that we want to say, Debarl, is one is that if you don't have 233 members on the floor, if you don't have them in the House, you don't even proceed to vote, because you already have you haven't achieved the threshold. And that I think is the route the majority leader was following. Deny them the 233, then there will not be any need for a vote, because you don't have the number. You need to have 233 for you to proceed to voting. And that informed the strategy that was taken, that was used by Duare. But also, when you look at the whole issue, in the morning, and I sat through the morning, we discussed and agreed on the budget and the cuts and what we needed to fund, and we passed it. So in the evening or in the afternoon, you are supposed then to say, this is the money that you are supposed to use to fund what you agreed in the morning. And this is the level of dishonesty. Why pass a budget in the morning that requires X amount of money, and then in the afternoon deny the government the funds that were going to fund what you passed in the morning? That was a really dishonest position taken by members of parliament. And we kept asking them, but you were part of the debate in the morning. Why didn't you shoot down that debate so that we don't pass a debate that requires more funding than what we already have?
Okay.
And now allow me to say this. You know, all of them say things that are not all aimed at me. I mean, I am not sure that somebody would want to say that he was locked up in the toilet. That's a ridiculous thing. If there is any person who claimed that she or he was locked up in the toilet, perhaps she must be confused, or he must be confused whether she is a worker or a member of parliament or what. I mean, if the leader of majority would resort to locking people up in the toilet, he needs to be disciplined, because you cannot do that. But there is also something that we need to understand, Debarl, and this is also clear. If you are in the party, in the Jubilee party, the party that I'm in, this was a memorandum from the president that came, and it came also with the budget cuts, the cuts that we needed to do. And there was an opportunity to disagree and the PG, and members went to the PG, and I had said before I was in court, I would also perhaps have gone for the PG if I had not that court hearing. You disagree at the PG, but when you come to the floor,
yes,
you stop playing to the gallery, because that was all playing to the gallery. You had an opportunity to influence what was to be tabled on the floor of the House. When it comes to the floor of the House, then you go as agreed in the PG. And I want to tell you that all that was for the gallery, both sides, the screaming that you saw there. You should allow debates on the floor. It is in debating, arguing your case, that you make sense of why you are elected. But it is not in screaming and shouting each other down.
All right.
But it also could easily have amounted to a vote of no confidence, by the way. The president has listened to you and told you, this is the way I want to vote, this is how I want to spend your money. Voting that can also be led to mean that you are saying, I have no confidence with the president. Finally, let me say this so that the others can contribute. This issue is even outside the budget. What we were seeing on the floor was supremacy battles. There are camps, political camps, that are emerging. And it is really, where are we headed? How are we heading to 2022? And people are looking for an opportunity to try and outdo one another, depending on which camp you wanted to place. And that's exactly, and that is why the numbers quickly dwindled. When a break was given,
thank you,
going back to the House, the numbers completely dwindled.
All right, let's hear from Muthomi Njuki, and we look also what is the way forward.
Debarl, I first and foremost want to really distance myself from what the Member of Parliament has said. Debarl, it is important to state forthright. The members of this bench who are seated here, right from the senator to the other senator, all these members have been to Parliament. And therefore we understand the procedures, we know the geography and even the structures in the Parliament, and even the standing orders as per se. And therefore, let the Member of Parliament not try to confuse Kenyans by implying that the executive this time had numbers that were meant to vote in support of the changes, because that is not true. I will say this. I will say this. Let me finish. I will say this. The procedure he talked about for voting, where he said that they were defeated. I mean, the people who wanted to support the bill were defeated, and therefore numbers had to be reduced by Duale. It is important to note that the voting is not just done by Mlolongo. There's a system of voting, and it is important to follow the events of the day. That the first voting was through the nays and the yes and the no, the ayes and the nays. And for that to happen, the speaker must have ascertained that they had the quorum or they had the numbers to vote for that particular clause at that particular time. But it is only when they disagree on whether the nays or the ayes have had it that someone over 35 have to stand up and say we want a division. And on the division being called, that's when you vote electronically. And for the speaker to agree for the division or to vote electronically to take place, then the numbers also must have been there. That is the second instance. And that is when now the executive must have decided through the agents to tamper with the system, so that instead of having the 349, the system could allow 352 to vote, showing numbers that did not exist, which was a second sabotage. And it's good to be very frank here. And it's in that particular moment, when that was taking place, then they must have decided, let's exit some people to ensure that we can dispute the numbers of the screen by taking a physical count. So there was a deliberate effort to ensure, not from within Parliament, but from outside Parliament, that this does not happen. It's good to be frank about that. And there was no third voting. It was all based on those two. The question is, would they have allowed the voting to take place twice if the quorum was not there, so that we can now start talk about that there were no 233? Where would the speaker have allowed the voting to take place if the numbers were really 215? That would have been unprocedural. So let's not fool the Kenyans here by saying there was magical things that happened in that floor of the House. There was nothing. It was just an effort to ensure that justice for the Kenyans is defeated on that floor of the House. And what justice was defeated, it was to ensure that the Mwananchi that time did not have representation. And it is important to know that now, after the signing of the bill, we are relying, as the people who run the county governments, totally relying on the Senate. And I'm happy we have two senators here, because the division of revenue allocation is coming to, it cannot be, what was passed cannot be implemented unless DORA is again passed through the Senate. And we are counting on them to ensure this time they're not locked up in toilets, to ensure that they do the proper thing, so that they do not send us back to rebudgeting again at the counties. And I hope that they will live to the name that they are the upper house, and they will not repeat what was seen in what they usually refer to as the lower house. Because at the moment, it doesn't matter these theatrics that we're talking about here. These are very serious matters. What the implication is what really we should be discussing here. What happened in Parliament was a shame by our standards. But the implications going forward is what is really the biggest hurt, or the hurting to the people of Kenya by what happened in the Parliament on that day.
All right, let's look on to what we actually facing right now, because if we have such clubby fingers from the executive that can manipulate also the legislator, right now people also are crying foul. There is no robust civil society that we have can really like advocate for the rights of the people as far as civil society is concerned. Opposition, we could say it has been emasculated right now. There is no voice of opposition anymore since the handshake as well. Where are we headed as a country? We have the single party rule now that we can see also all facets of it looming over us. Right now we know that yes, some of the people who violated, as Okong'o Omogeni was saying, and has been reported elsewhere in the dailies as well, that they will be whipped both from Jubilee and ODM as well. So where are we headed as a country? Civil society, you can talk to us also, Dr. Shem Ochuodho.
Debarl, I want to look at what happened from a positive perspective. You know, they say there's a silver lining to every situation like this. The fact that nobody really, we almost like have a hung parliament, so to speak, because nobody seems to be really in full control of his or her troops. In this case, it's more his, from what we saw. If what we witnessed was genuine. You know, of course, the MPs, even those who are voting for Naes, there are those who may have been part of a stage-managed situation that let it look to the public like you didn't want this to go through, but you didn't have numbers. So I think, for me, I want to look at it from that positive side, that, look, if we get to a situation where we can see a rebellion of sorts emerging, whether it's in Jubilee or ODM, Jubilee A, Jubilee B, and so on and so forth, I think it's healthy for this country. That's one. Secondly, I think Kenyans also need to realize this was not a simple majority vote, where the nays were more than the ayes. Being a constitutional matter, of course, there was the 2/3 threshold that was required. So you could still be more. Perhaps going forward, we may need to look into future constitutional amendments that should the president just have a carte blanche, that once we can't get the 2/3, no matter the gravity of the matter at hand, that he just has his way. I think that's something we need to look into. And maybe we could borrow something here from Botswana. It's a nation that's reputed for having dialogue and conversations, rather than trying to arm twist. I'm sure if we sat down, for example, DCG, the Dialogue Contact Group, is planning to have about 20 eminent economists around table to look into these things, because we need to find a way. I'm sure if the executive of the and the legislature had sat, a way would have been found. But it was mishandled from day one. We remember the story we told. The legislature took very long. I don't know why the administration took long to forward the documents to the president. And then the president also took action without maybe the PG that was being held, or the PGs needed to have been held prior. So we must have a culture of conversation. But lastly, in this regard, Debarl, I think the sanctity and independence of Parliament is something that needs to worry at us. But if we are going to have a situation where we cannot rely on Parliament, then we need to rethink, do we need Parliament?
Do we need Parliament? And of course, we want to also ride on that. Do we need Parliament in the first place? And what you say is, do you think also the President should be given that carte blanche in case we have a hung Parliament where we are sort of immobilized, that the President, yes, can have his way? Or will that also be opening up another, spawning ground for a president who's very powerful, of which we're trying to not give so much power to the president, but to the institutions?
Yeah, I mean, Debarl, that's something that is in the constitution that the Kenyan people enacted in 2010. So short of a constitutional amendment, that will remain the position. I think the bigger picture is, I look at
sorry, I don't follow. What is in the Constitution?
The Constitution demands that if the President does not agree with the Parliament on the passage of a bill, if he returns it back to Parliament with a memorandum, then you need 2/3 majority to overturn, the memorandum that has been sent to Parliament by the President.
But he says in case of what we were seeing, and of course the whole House is immobilized.
But
what is the way forward?
I began my comment by saying that we saw for the first time a fairly bold and independent Parliament. I mean, you saw people, I saw the Laikipia women rep, Waruguru, coming out and standing up against the President. I saw Otienda Molo, even had a tweet. He said he doesn't care whether the party wants to discipline him. Mm-hmm. That's a very good sign, and I think we should applaud some of these members of Parliament who have come out to show that they are independent, and that on an issue that touches on Kenyan people, they will vote not on party affiliation, but on the side that represents the public. Yes. And I think that's what all these MPs who are standing up against their parties, they were trying to stand on the side of the Kenyan people. And Debarl, I want to tell you, let's tell these parties that we don't want this primitivity of thinking that you can put people into a box and stop them from thinking. Even in the US, you saw when President Bush was presented a vote to the House whether they should start war against Iraq. Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton defied the Democrats and voted with the Republicans, because she said that's an issue that she thought it traverses beyond party lines. And I've seen the late McCain voting against the Republicans on issues he didn't believe in, like the Obama healthcare. So we cannot allow this, trajectory by the parties, big parties like ODM and Jubilee, that if you vote against a position of your party leader, then discipline should be taken against you. That's something that we shouldn't allow. But again, the bigger picture on the way forward, Debarl, if you read the Constitution, especially Article 109, let me see if I can get it very quickly. There is a very interesting thing that took place, in that money that had been allocated to counties, and we had already passed the DORA, CARA, and the disbursement schedule. The implication of this memorandum by the president is that we are going to take away 9 billion from the county governments. Now, what Article 109 says is that a bill not concerning county government is considered only in the National Assembly. A bill not concerning county government is considered only in the National Assembly. Now, really, you can't say that this particular bill is a bill that does not concern county assemblies. Because once you once you put a clause that takes away 9 billion from the county governments, then you have touched clause 109. Now, the next clause that will come in is clause 110. Now, when you have a bill concerning county government, and it has been passed by the National Assembly, the Speaker of that House shall refer the bill to the other House, which is the Senate. Now, Debarl, what we have is a situation where this particular bill was passed by Parliament, and I don't know whether it was at night or during the day. At night, somebody rushed it to the President, and the following day, it was assented to. I mean, my stand is that that bill is actually unconstitutional, because it did not get the input of the Senate, and the implication is that you are taking away 9 billion from the county governments. And you know, under Article 96, the mandate of the Senate is that we serve to represent the interest of the counties and to protect the interests of counties. Now, if you take away 9 billion without involving the Senate, isn't that unconstitutional? And I want to tell you, Debarl, that there is an opinion by the Supreme Court. You can read it. Advisory number 2 of 2013, where the Supreme Court gave an advisory and said that that mandate that has been given to the Senate is broad. And it's through that advisory opinion that the Senate started to have an input on DORA, distribution of county revenue. Before then, the view of the Parliament, of the lower house, let me say, so that we have a distinction between Senate and Parliament, was that the Senate did not have a say. So what I'm saying this morning is that the process that took place on Thursday, first and foremost, is unconstitutional, because the input of the Senate was not there. And when now we will be invited to make amendments, because we must make amendments to 3 acts, the DORA, the CARA, and the disbursement schedule. We will not assent to that, because we cannot pass acts which, right from the beginning, went through a process that was unconstitutional. My take is that if this process is put to a constitutional test, it will not pass the validity.
It will not pass the validity. So are we opening up Pandora's box as far as the move is concerned, as it raises, of course, a very poignant point that, 9.1 billion, that is a tidy sum of money taken away from the counties, and they did not really have their input as well. Senator Poghisio, I don't know, do you hold with this view that this was unconstitutional? And if at all it was unconstitutional, which way to go?
Debarl, you know, for every bill that, if you really want to deny the Senate the opportunity, you have to print on the bill that this bill does not concern counties. So can you imagine that bill saying that, when actually the counties are going to suffer as a result of even signing this particular law into act. So I am of course I support my colleague there, because he is an expert in the Constitution, and also because I also do believe that there is a problem that's going to come between now and the time of implementation, which is of course immediate. But you think counties, have already laid down everything for themselves, and they are ready to use the money, and then all of a sudden you're told the money is not coming. But that notwithstanding, Debarl, even the population, the Kenyans, must also be given an opportunity to represent views, for matters that are going to affect them. And all I'm saying basically is that although it was a crisis that the government had to surmount, it was a crisis that the speaker had to surmount. I mean, it was a crisis that the leader majority had to surmount, because it was a do or die kind of situation. But do or die for who? In this case, priority is, who is the priority in this case? So those are the kind of things that we need to interrogate and properly deal with. The Senate now is going to sit in Eldoret for the next week, and these matters are going to come up, because it's going to be an issue. But also, I'm sure county governments are going to get together, and something is going to brew. So, was it necessary to just avoid keeping, to completely ignore the other house and go straight to signing into a bill? In fact, there was so much hurry in trying to get signed that they forgot that there was one more step, which is to get the other house to concur.
So are we seeing a sort of a chink in the armor, that there is a handy opportunity, of course, maybe to come with a remedial measure of this particular bill? Because many Kenyans think, oh, now, yes, this is gone, it is past the Rubicon, there's nothing much that we can do. But if at all there is an issue of constitutionality with it, that it's not really, passing the threshold as far as the Constitution is concerned, then what does it portend? That yes, the Senate or someone or a citizen will move to courts and say this is unconstitutional, right? And maybe we should reverse the passing of this particular bill. What really happens if the bill has been enacted, assented to by the president?
I hope I have enough time, because how much time are you giving? Every one of these has an issue that I would want to
could we focus? I think
yes, I want to focus on
the important
one
point.
Of the things Debarl that is here.
Just a moment.
One thing for sure, I must tell my colleague, member of parliament, that we are not the subject matter of his contribution.
That's exactly the ones raising the issues.
Governor, do you have something that is in it, so that we can give Jeremiah?
That is
just a moment. No, you will. Just a moment. Very briefly.
Before he speaks, I just want to comment very briefly to support what the senator for Okong'o Omogeni has said. That more than two articles of the Constitution are violated in this particular case. Article 189 that provides a consultation between governments on a matter like this.
Article?
Which is 189. That says that the governments need to consult when we have an issue of this magnitude that affects both governments. And that is why the Intergovernmental Economic Council, the IBEC, has been put in place to ensure that we have negotiations between the county and the national government before a change like this takes place. And that never happened. And these particular cases were just bypassed, and it just went to the National Assembly straight away, and it was signed into law the following day. You also look at what the Senate passed in DORA 2018. It is very clear that these monies, or rather the funds that are normally allocated to the counties, is normally based on a projection of what the revenue is going to be. And it says very well, if in the projection, when the actual collection of revenue falls short of what was projected, then the county government is not supposed to be affected. In this particular case, the shortfall should be borne by the national government. But if there is more revenue collected in this particular case, then the beneficiary in this case should not be the county government but the national government. And that is clearly what it says in the Act in Part 5.1. And therefore, both were violated. It means that even as the Senate looks at Dora again, and the Kara, they should ensure that they interrogate whether what they are looking at is really legal as far as the previous act they had passed is concerned.
Thank you.
And based on those technicalities, I'll be very surprised if Umtata is not in court today to challenge that. It means there's something wrong.
And if these governors can only rely on Omutata, then we are doomed as a country. But
Mutata has actually been the defender
but honestly,
of the Constitution.
Honestly, and allow me space. You know, you have. I didn't interrupt any of them because of your very firm arm. But let me say this: I think we still are looking at it. We are the way the governor and my colleagues are looking. It's just like we did it in Parliament. You are here complaining about the cuts. And if you do not want the cuts, you also don't want an increase in taxation. You can't have your cake and eat it. And for the benefit of the governor, the cuts were discussed in the morning. The team that you support, that is supposed to have helped you defend the cuts, approved the cuts in the morning. So I don't know who it is that you have a quarrel with. I don't know whether you have a quarrel with the government side that supported the passing of the bill, or you have a problem with the people who supported it with the cuts. And the cuts included the 9 billion shillings that was done in the morning.
Okay, let's
No,
go.
no.
Let's go blow by blow.
No. Yeah, allow me to just...
Because I don't want to even myself to be lost in many Kenyans, yeah? From the point of where Okong'o Omogeni is saying with these particular cuts, yeah? First of all, let's just clarify from that particular point of view, the procedure. Coming from the House, going to the Senate, that was not really done. And of course, they are custodians of the Constitution.
And I know, so I want to agree with you, Debarl.
First of all, do you agree that is unconstitutional in the first place? Let's begin from there.
And that will go into the Constitutional Court, and that is already outside that. But let me also read it.
I want to hear from you.
Let me read this for you. The same, you know, Debarl, even in church.
So if you say it will go to the Constitutional Court.
Let me give me space.
I just want to get clarification from you.
We have preachers who also read part of the fast, and they don't read the whole of it. What my senior did here, I'm reading to the Constitution for you.
Okay.
What my senior did here is to read part of 109.
What
he didn't read it all the way to the end. I only want to read the head. I want to read the head. 5. A bill may be introduced by any member or committee of the relevant House of Parliament, but a money bill may be introduced only in the National Assembly in accordance with Article 114. This issue of the budget, it was introduction. You take the meaning further. You get it. This is a money bill, and it was properly before the House. And I also want to say, even as I allow them, if your House, either the Senate or the National Assembly, the most important thing in life of any representation is what my colleague has said: no taxation without representation. And if the House you sit in is not involved in the budget making of a country, does that make it a higher house or a lower house? I think it is, again, you may sit here and say that this is the lower house, and that is but if you cannot determine how money or how funds will be distributed, used, raised in the country, you certainly cannot be sitting in the upper house. But going back to what was mentioned, let me just, because, you know, we are trying to bash Parliament, and we are trying to say that many things, including, if we are in the House, like if I was, I would have done, and the question is called, the persons who are in the House at that given time, the majority were the ones who were supporting the defeating of the memorandum. For the reason that a number of people had walked out. And I don't want us to miss the point. It does not matter who the majority are, if you have not met the constitutional threshold of 233, the vote is of no consequence. Just like it is the case now in the constitution. If you are passing a motion or you are passing an amendment to any law or the enactment of a law, you cannot call a vote if you do not have a quorum.
Okay.
Now, in this particular case,
that we understand, because that really happened. Because I don't want us to spend a lot of time. I don't think it's of any material utility for this conversation.
It is, because what you are saying.
Yes.
What you are saying is that what you are trying to say is that it was leaked. The vote was leaked. That is very important. If we don't understand that, because it also goes to the integrity of the House as a whole. I am not the way we behaved, but the institution. It is guided by Article 115 or Article 122. You need to read it as you are talking about that voting.
But
on the issue of dialogue, which was raised by Mheshimiwa Shem, dialoguing started a couple of days earlier. There was a dialogue at Bomas of Kenya. That I sat through the budget making process. The judiciary was invited.
Right.
If the executive was there, Public Parliamentary Service Commission was there.
I don't want to.
Commission was there. So there was that dialoguing, and I don't want to say that it was exhaustive. Dialoguing needs to be there, and that is why our constitution talks about public participation.
Because I don't want.
But you are not giving me space.
No.
Because I'll just keep quiet permanently.
Yes,
I'll not say anything.
No, you won't. Because I don't want us to mix issues. Because if we go to how it was,
and
just give me a moment. That one has passed. Right, so yes. I don't find it of any material utility
but
for this conversation.
Yeah, but it is
just a moment.
You are entertaining my colleagues with such debates on it.
They've raised a very good question here.
But you allow me also to just go to where I want.
All that I don't want is history, because we don't have time for history.
You started us on history. You've forgotten it so quickly. You are the one who told us about the people being locked in the toilet. You are raising it here.
We discussed that.
But I also want to say this as I leave it.
Yes.
Because maybe you don't want to give me a lot of space to say this. Let me say this.
You should not talk again.
I would Muthomi, but I want to tell you, as you say that you are on the side of Kenyans, remember I'm talking on behalf of Kenyans, and I'm talking on behalf of the people of Daragwa every time I have an opportunity. And I want to tell you this, I needed an increment in taxation because I need projects in my constituency funded. I cannot ask for funding or implementation of projects in my place if there are no revenues. And finally, even as you talk about revenue sharing between the national government and the county government, this revenue must be corrected. If you don't have revenue, what are you sharing?
But Debarl, based on that, very briefly, based on that,
yes,
you know, Kioni is taking us around as if we were against what the activity that was taking place. But we must differentiate between the actual voting and what we are voting for.
That's not.
We are not against. We are not against the taxes that was to be collected. But where was it being raised from? That is what they were supposed to have made the amendment. Why did he allow CDF to be raided? Yet his people in Daragwa needs the CDF. Why did he allow 9 billion to be raided? Yet the people of Daragwa needs money for hospitals. Why didn't they pick another place? Why did they allow 1.5 billion, which was meant to fund the subsidy of cooking gas, that was supposed to, imagine, we are increasing the price of fuel. We are increasing the price of kerosene. But the money that was supposed to buy the cooking gas for the poor Mwananchi by getting subsidized price is also taken away. Yes. Where are you driving them to? Because those are the things they should have discussed there and say, we are going against this because of the 1, 2, 3. That should be.
Thank you, Madam Governor. Let me see from Dr. Shem Ochuodho. Just a moment,
I think there is an important point Mheshimiwa Kioni is raising, even though he considers himself being on the minority here. The fact that, of course, money does not grow on trees, we are told. So if you're going to add or subtract or increase, it has to come from somewhere. So obviously that's a granted issue. But my advice to the executive for free, the president needs to fire his economic advisors and his legal advisors. I think in this particular regard, both legal and economic, because I keep wondering, at these things that I'm seeing, I'm a logician, I'm not an economist, but I'm wondering the logic in some terms of some of what I see. I say this because I'm concerned from day one. I would say this budget process, the finance bill process, the budgeting process was flawed for me from day one, because there was never sufficient public participation. Jeremiah Kioni is saying there was a meeting at Bomas and so on. Then my challenge to the legislatures is this aspect of public participation, which is so important in our constitution. Although there are some statutes about it, I think we have not gotten it right. Personally, and many Kenyans I know didn't participate in the budget-making process. And Debarl, you are raising the issue of civil society. I think the comfort Kenyans need to have is civil society may have been muted, but they are reorganizing. So I don't think it will be too long before we start seeing them. Just recently we had the religious
You're reorganizing, yet some very pertinent issues are really passing, you know,
yes,
under the bridge, like what really went down the tubes with this particular legislation.
Just last week,
what sort of reorganization are you talking about?
The religious leaders at the National Dialogue Conference, they spoke about against these taxes. So it's not that civil society is totally mute. We were hoping that government would work with us to achieve what some people call TKWW, the Kenya we want.
Right.
And in that particular regard, Debarl, I cannot fail to mention the issue of the fuel prices. Even though we are told taxes were lowered from 16 to 8%, when you go to fuel, I haven't seen that commensurate tax or price coming down. I think the aspect of trust, the aspect of fidelity to the law, these are issues that we must internalize and make sure that the regulatory bodies ensure that if whatever little that Kenyans has been ceded to the Kenyans is implemented. But we're in a situation where even that is not happening. Lastly, I wanted to say, I wanted also the executive to take advantage of what's happening, the chaos in parliament, the outcry that's coming from Kenyans on social media, everywhere. The president, let him tell IMF, look, my good people, even though I wanted to work with you, Kenyans have rejected this. I would not want executive to take it in negative light. It's a positive thing they should take advantage of.
All right. Okay, let's hear from Senator Poghisio, because of that chaos in parliament was deliberate.
Well, what you have seen happen is a bill passed under very acrimonious and very unclear circumstances is now an act of parliament. Okay, so we have it's already affecting us. So we should be thinking to ourselves, the end justifies the means, but to whose advantage? In this case, are we becoming more executive oriented rather than the people oriented? And I think that we have to deal with that. There's a weakness which, in my view, must be addressed. It's in the economic and finance corner or sphere of our government. And I think we need to look at that. We need to see why it is easier to affect the people than to deal with the theft which is going on, the amount of money and leakages in the system. It is easier for us to deal, it should be easier for us to deal with blocking all these leakages. And actually revenue is not about just collecting, it's about stewardship of that revenue, and also how much you manage the leakages. And if you find that you're still adding more water to a leaking container, I mean, what kind of economics is that? Right. So we're going to have to deal with those situations in that sense. Now that it's beyond us, we must now find a way in which if it can be salvaged, fine. If it can be reversed, some of the things, fine. But eventually, the interest of the common man, the interest of the Kenyan, the Wanjiku as they call, it should be at the forefront.
Thank you. Yeah. So back to you, Senator Okong'o Omogeni. Is there any redeeming hope on salvaging this particular act right now as it is? Since it's an act, does it mean then that's it? We've crossed the Rubicon, water under the bridge, there's nothing much we can do? And if you're raising questions of legality, that is unconstitutional, the way it went, and we don't get the broad picture, maybe you can clarify for us so that we know who will go to the courts. Is it Okong'o Omogeni? Will the Senate also move to court? Maybe this will be also one of your sittings when you deliberate this in Uasin for your first, county sittings as well.
Yeah, first, I like the comment by Mheshimiwa Kioni. He said if they made an error in applying the Constitution, they have said the Constitutional Court will deal with it. And that's a good, I don't know whether to call it a confession or realization. It's a good realization that somebody will check when there is an abuse of the Constitution. And I think Debarl going forward, that is, I think, the option that is option number one. Because you see, clearly, in terms of procedure, there was a deliberate plan to ensure that the Senate does not have a say in this. And let's realize as Kenyans that we have now two ways of exercising power of governance in this country. The two levels are the county governments and the national government. Now, when you are told by Mheshimiwa Kioni that they sat at Bomas and they held consultations, and you have not heard anybody talking about consultations of county governments through their body, Council of Governors, you have not heard anybody tell you that the Senate was consulted in this. That is a process that clearly looks contrary to the provisions of the Constitution, because the power and functions of county governments are affected by the passage of the bills that went through on Thursday. So going forward, of course, what the Supreme Court said in Advisory 2 of 2013 is that even if the Senate Speaker was to write to the lower house and say, we think this is a bill that does not concern counties, still the Constitutional Court will have the final say on interpreting whether that particular bill is one that required the input of the Senate. And I can tell you without any fear of contradiction, Debarl, that this particular one is a bill that required the input of the Senate, and it's therefore a violation of Article 109 and 110. So I think two things. One, the Senate needs to deliberate as we go to Uasin Gishu this week. We need to deliberate on the way forward and what action we need to take. Option number two, Kenyans, including Omutata, including even the Law Society of Kenya, Institute of Accountants, anybody should take the first option of rushing to court to ensure that this particular bill is declared unconstitutional. Finally, Debarl.
Those are your closing remarks.
Yes, my closing remarks. Debarl, you don't have to, squeeze and milk Kenyans in the pretext of raising money for development. Rwanda, and I think Mheshimiwa Ochuodho has been to Rwanda. Rwanda has got no tax on fuel, because they understand that if you touch fuel, you will touch the common mwananchi. And yet, they are one of the fastest growing economies in East Africa. And if we are talking about an East African community, and this includes an economic community, then we should not disadvantage one country against the other.
All right, closing remarks, Governor Muthomi Njuki, closing remarks.
Yeah,
30 seconds.
It's critical to look at the implications of this act, or what happened to what is happening in the counties. And remember, people live at the counties. First and foremost, it means we had the Division of Revenue Act that was passed that is now null and void, because we have a new one that has to be debated and passed. Same with CARA and dispatchment schedule. The question is, are counties going to continue using the old one as even we await for the new disbursement? It may be not possible. And therefore it means that all the programs in the county, if this is not adjusted, will come to a standstill. Where as the Senate goes through that, then they bring it back to the counties, and then we have to go through the whole budget process again. Then it means nothing will be happening at the counties.
Thank you, Manaka.
And it is critical to note that it is at the counties where the rubber meets the road.
Thank you.
The health sector, where we have the big four, is at the county. It is
Thank
important for this to be sorted out.
Right. Dr. Shem, Ochuodho, your closing remarks? 30 seconds.
Debarl, chapter 12, actually public finance, it enumerates many of these things we are talking about. How we need to raise funds, how we need to tax, the consultations that need to be done. I am not convinced this was done. Lastly, with regard to how our economics and public finance are dispensed, I really think we need to have greater conversation in this regard. Let the president, Kenya is bleeding, let's find a solution before things get worse.
Samuel Poghisio, 30 seconds.
I say reconsider VAT on basic items for now or for even for longer term. But two, I think that the president used to have something called the National Economic Social Council. I think that that is one thing that should be revived because it involved an almost international team that would look at all scenarios and help with advice. But finally, I think I must say, Debarl, that the legacy of the president, which is the big four, requires cooperation. It requires involvement of county governments. It requires, and therefore, these things must be balanced when it comes to considering budget cuts.
Thank you very much. Jeremiah Kioni, your closing remarks.
One is that I think it is important to recall that we were dealing with a presidential memorandum, which had timelines. And when you have those constitutional timelines, the level of consultation must be within, it's defined equally by those timelines. Two is to say that when we say that we are at Bomas, it was the budget committee that was at Bomas. Again, they invited those they invited. And as I conclude, three is when you say that there were chaos in Parliament, it's always good to find out who caused the chaos. If I'm there and I want to speak, and you want to deny me an opportunity to speak, and when we go to voting, I still defeat you. The fact that I defeated you does not mean that I caused the chaos. You caused chaos because you did not even want to be defeated in a debate. If you are mature enough, you will allow a debate to progress, to proceed in Parliament.
Thank you.
And it is important that proper analysis are also done by the media. And finally, I think the most important one is, which we did not discuss, is the cuts and why the cuts. Why was it done here and not here? That is a very important debate
for the next forum on Monday as well. I want to thank